My name is Lucy Darlington, 29 years old, and that night, over a half-empty bottle of beer in a living room still filled with cardboard boxes, I learned I was temporary. Brian was sitting cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through his phone thumbs, flicking lazily over pictures of sweaty CrossFit guys flexing their arms under neon lights. I'd just finished hauling the last box of his stuff into his new apartment. My spine felt like it was made of cracked glass, but I still managed a weak laugh when he complained that the Wi-Fi wasn't connecting fast enough. Then, without even glancing up, he said it. "You know I'm only with you until someone better comes along, right?" It didn't even sound cruel, more like he was reading a weather update. I froze mid-sip. The beer burned my throat as I swallowed. What I said softly. Brian shrugged. "You're sweet, Lucy. You're comfortable. But let's be real. You're not endgame material. You're like a calm before something better. A placeholder." The word placeholder hung in the air like smoke. He smiled faintly, like he was proud of his honesty. "You don't have to be upset. It's just how things are. You deserve the truth." I put my beer down slowly, watching the condensation slide over the label. My voice surprised even me. It was calm, almost too calm. "Fair enough." Brian finally looked up, brows raised. "You're not mad?" I smiled, tired, sad, but polite. "Thanks for being honest." He grinned, relieved. "See, that's what I like about you. No drama." That night when I got home, the silence felt heavier than the boxes I'd carried. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just thought about how easily someone can measure your worth by how replaceable they think you are. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, the dull light flickering above me like an interrogation. He'd called me comfortable, the kind of word people use for shoes they don't wear outside. My mind kept replaying something that happened weeks ago. Brian had been mocking my job at a dinner party IT support. So basically turning things off and on again. Everyone laughed except Nate, his best friend. Nate, the quiet grad student working on renewable energy who'd always asked me real questions about my family, about my ideas. When Brian made that joke, Nate had looked at him and said, "You know, fixing things people depend on takes a lot of brains and patience. Not everyone can do it." I'd laughed it off then, but now the memory burned differently. I spent the next few days moving through work like a ghost. My coworkers chatted about office gossip while I replayed that moment over and over. "You're a placeholder." Not a girlfriend. Not even a person to him, just an intermission. But here's the thing about being a placeholder. You hold space until someone else is ready to move in. You keep things stable, balanced, predictable. And if you can do that for someone else's comfort, you can damn well do it for your own growth. By Friday, my sadness had curdled into something sharper. I wasn't going to beg for love from a man who thought I was disposable. If I was a placeholder, then maybe it was time to replace him. That evening, I cleaned my apartment for the first time in weeks, lit candles, opened windows, made space. It wasn't for him, it was for me. And maybe, just maybe, for the quiet part of me that still remembered how Nate looked at me that night, like I was someone worth listening to. I texted Brian once out of habit. "Lucy, hope your move's going well." Brian, "Yeah, great. Gym's across the street. Win-win. You should start coming with me sometime. You'd look amazing if you tried CrossFit." Lucy, "Thanks, I'll think about it." But I didn't think about it. I thought about how he said it like a coach, not a partner. Like my worth had a muscle percentage attached. When I turned off my phone, the quiet settled again, but this time it didn't hurt. It just felt clean. 2 nights later, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching streetlights shimmer off passing cars. Somewhere across town, Brian was probably laughing, scrolling, already auditioning my replacement. And maybe he'd find her someone louder, flashier, shinier. But as the city hummed below, I realized something simple and devastating. He wasn't my heartbreak. He was my wake-up call. And if I was a placeholder, I could decide when to let go. I glanced at my phone and saw a notification from Instagram. A photo popped up Nate at the same coffee shop Brian used to brag about. His caption read, "Some things are worth building slowly." For the first time in days, I smiled. Not because I was over Brian, but because I was finally starting to remember who I was before him. And as I drifted to sleep, one thought kept circling in my head, calm and certain. If I'm temporary in his story, then he's temporary in mine. The next Thursday morning, I walked into Brew Haven, the tiny cafe tucked between a florist and an old record store downtown. It wasn't coincidence. Brian had mentioned more times than I could count that his best friend Nate came here every Thursday morning to study. Back then, I used to roll my eyes when he bragged about Nate's boring routine. Now, I was curious about what boring actually looked like. The smell of roasted beans and soft jazz filled the air. Sunlight poured through the window, cutting gold across the dark wooden tables. And there he was, hunched over his laptop earbuds, dangling a half-empty cup beside a stack of printed research papers. Same calm posture, same faint crease between his brows when he read. He looked up just as I walked past. Recognition flickered, then a smile the kind that reached his eyes. "Lucy," he said, standing up a little. "Hey," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more real than I expected. "Mind if I join?" "Of course." He closed his laptop, suddenly attentive. "It's been a while. How are you and Brian?" That name still hit like static, but I didn't flinch. I took a sip of my coffee first, let the bitterness coat my tongue before answering. Actually, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. When I told him what Brian said word for word down to placeholder, Nate froze. His eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed with something close to anger. "He actually said that to your face," casually I said, like he was telling me my shoelace was untied. Nate shook his head. "That's cruel. You didn't deserve that." I laughed softly. "It's fine. At least I know where I stand now." "No, it's not fine," he said, voice low but firm. "You're one of the most grounded people I know. You don't play games. You don't make people feel small to make yourself feel big." He hesitated, then added Brian's lucky, "You didn't throw the beer bottle at him." That made me smile. Trust me, I considered it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something that wasn't shame or sadness. I felt seen. We talked for nearly an hour, about everything and nothing. His research on renewable energy, my half-finished coding project I'd started during lockdown. He told me about his dog Milo, who'd recently learned to open the fridge. I told him about my neighbor who collected ceramic frogs and named each one after movie stars. When I mentioned Brian again out of habit, Nate interrupted gently. "You don't have to talk about him if you don't want to." I looked down at my cup. "I think I need to, just not in the same way anymore." There was a silence, comfortable, not awkward. Then Nate said something I didn't expect. "You know, I always thought Brian didn't deserve you." That hit like a small spark. I looked up. "Why's that?" He shrugged, eyes soft. "Because you listen, you care, you build people up. He just uses people as mirrors to see what he wants to see." Something in my chest shifted, then quietly like a door unlocking. We parted ways outside the cafe. He was heading to campus. I was heading to work. The sunlight was brighter now, almost defiant. Before I could leave, Nate said, "Hey, Lucy. Yeah, dinner sometime." "As friends, of course." His voice stumbled slightly on friends. I pretended not to notice. "Sure," I said. "I'd like that." That evening, Brian texted me. "Brian, where were you all morning? Didn't answer my calls. Lucy. Had coffee with a friend." "Brian who?" "Lucy." "Nate." "Brian. That's weird. Don't do that again. He's my friend." "Lucy. You said I was temporary." "Remember, Brian." "Lucy. Don't be dramatic. You're taking things too seriously." "Lucy." "Right. That's what I'm done doing." I put my phone face down on the table and exhaled. For the first time, his control over me felt paper thin. 2 nights later, Nate and I met for dinner. Nothing fancy, a small Thai place downtown. The kind of place where the air smelled like lemongrass and laughter. We talked for 3 hours straight, slipping from jokes to secrets to stories about who we used to be before people broke parts of us. He told me about his late father, a quiet man who believed in doing good even when no one noticed. I told him about how my mom used to whisper Vietnamese proverbs into my ear whenever I lost faith in people. "Gieo nhân nào gặp quả này," she'd say, "you reap what you sow." Nate smiled. "Seems like Brian's harvest season's coming." I laughed a sound I hadn't heard from myself in a long time. When we finally stepped out into the cool night air, I realized I didn't feel guilty. Not for having dinner with Nate, not for smiling, not for letting someone else remind me what being valued feels like. As we walked toward our cars, Nate hesitated. "Lucy, just so we're clear if Brian asks." "He can ask all he wants," I said. "He doesn't own the answers anymore." He stared at me for a second, then nodded, smiling in quiet admiration. That night, I lay in bed replaying every word, every laugh, every glance. Not because I was falling for Nate, not yet, but because I was finally rising out of someone else's shadow. Before turning off the lights, I checked my phone one last time. A new message from Brian blinked at the top of the screen. "Brian, we need to talk about boundaries." I smiled faintly, whispering into the dark. "You should have thought about that before you crossed mine." It was a Friday evening when Nate texted, "Italian or sushi? Your choice." I typed back, "Italian. Always Italian." We agreed to meet at Giovanni's, a small place downtown. Nothing fancy, just candlelight, the smell of garlic, and old love songs humming from hidden speakers. I wore a dark green dress that I hadn't touched in months. Brian used to say it made me look too serious. Tonight I wanted serious. I wanted me. When I arrived, Nate was already at the table, standing to greet me with that same calm, steady warmth that had started to feel dangerously safe. He didn't compliment my dress. He said, "You look confident." It was the first time someone had ever made confidence sound like beauty. Over pasta and laughter, something in me loosened. We talked about books, family, the quiet loneliness of being the mature one in every relationship. Nate told me how Brian used to brag about taming me. I nearly choked on my wine. Taming me. He grimaced. "Yeah." He said you were a project. I never understood why he saw kindness as weakness. I laughed softly, because he's never met a kind woman who could walk away. The night was perfect in that fragile, cinematic way that always happens before something breaks. And of course it did. Through the restaurant's wide glass window, I saw him, Brian, walking past, his arm draped over the shoulder of a blonde woman I recognized vaguely from his gym stories. He was wearing his date night shirt, the one I'd ironed 100 times before. He glanced toward the window, and our eyes met. For a split second, he froze. Then the storm came. He burst through the door like a bad scene in a rom-com that had forgotten the comedy. People turned. Forks paused midair. Brian's face was red, not from embarrassment, but pure disbelief. "You're on a date with my best friend," he barked. I set down my fork. My voice stayed calm. "Placeholder, remember your word, not mine." The color drained from his face, replaced by fury. "What the hell, Lucy?" "You said you needed space." "I needed honesty," I said evenly. "You offered cruelty." Nate stood up slowly, his chair scraping the tile. "Brian, you need to leave," he said, firm but respectful. "You don't get to humiliate her after what you said." Brian glared at him. "You're supposed to be my friend." "I am," Nate replied. "But friendship doesn't mean helping you destroy good people." Gasps rippled through nearby tables. Brian's jaw worked soundlessly, as if he couldn't believe his own script had flipped. Then he pointed at me, trembling. "You think you're better than me now because you're with some grad school boy who reads poetry between lab experiments?" I leaned back in my chair, smiling faintly. "No, Brian. I just stopped feeling small next to you." The manager appeared calm but firm. "Is there a problem here?" Brian scoffed. "Yeah, there's a problem. My girlfriend's cheating on me with my friend." The manager blinked. "Girlfriend, ma'am, is that true?" I shook my head. "No, sir. He downgraded me to placeholder last week." A few chuckles spread around the room. The manager crossed his arms. "Then I suggest you leave, sir." Brian's date. The blonde had slipped in through the door behind him, watching the scene unfold in horror. Her eyes darted between us before she muttered, "Wait!" Placeholder Brian turned desperate. "Babe, it's not what it sounds like." "Oh, it's exactly what it sounds like," I said softly. "He just keeps his upgrades and placeholders on the same rotation." The restaurant fell silent, except for the clatter of his ego hitting the floor. Brian's face twisted between anger and shame, but all he could manage was a bitter, "You'll regret this, Lucy. Both of you." Maybe I said standing. "But at least I won't regret who I became after you." I took Nate's hand, and we walked out under the soft glow of the streetlights. No guilt, no fear, just the strange, exhilarating calm of taking your story back. When I got home later, I saw 12 missed calls and 1 voicemail. I pressed play. Brian's voice came through slurred, furious unraveling. "You think you're clever. You think you can humiliate me like that. Nate doesn't even like you. He's using you to piss me off. You're boring, Lucy. Predictable. You'll die fixing printers for people who don't remember your name. You'll come crawling back when he gets tired of you. Mark my words, because no one stays with a placeholder." The message cut off. Apparently, there's a 1-minute limit on how long someone can hate you before technology gets bored. I sat there in silence, staring at the blinking red light. Then I laughed. Quietly at first, then louder. Because the voicemail wasn't painful, it was proof. Proof that the man who once controlled my emotions now couldn't even control his own. I replayed the words in my mind. Placeholder. He'd branded me with it like an insult. But maybe, just maybe, that word meant something else now. Maybe a placeholder isn't someone waiting to be replaced. Maybe it's someone holding space for something better, something real to finally begin. And for the first time in a long, long while, I knew this story wasn't about him anymore. It was about what comes after. When Brian lost control, he didn't just fall apart, he made a performance of it. The voicemail was only the overture. What came next was an entire symphony of madness. 3 days after the restaurant scene, I got a call from my manager. His voice was tight, careful. "Lucy, did you make a house call last week?" I frowned. "A house call?" "No, I've been working remotely on the internal server migration." He exhaled. "Okay, that's what I thought. Some woman called HR said she was a client. Claimed you made inappropriate comments during a service visit." There was a pause. "Did she say her name?" "Yeah, Patricia Sterling. That's Brian's mother." He chuckled in disbelief. "Thought so. Don't worry, we're handling it. She didn't even know what company we were. She just said she'd make sure you never work in tech again." My cheeks flushed hot. I muttered, "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." He softened. "Hey, don't apologize for someone else's breakdown." When I hung up, I felt that old flicker of humiliation, the one Brian used to light in me like clockwork. But it didn't burn the same way anymore. It only made me pity him. That night I told Nate. We sat on my couch, Thai takeout spread between us, Milo the dog asleep at our feet. He stared at me wide-eyed. "She called your job, that's next-level psychotic." "Correction," I said. "They called my job mother and son duo." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "Lucy, you should block them both." I did. She called my office line. He called from a new number an hour later. What did he say? I pulled up the message, pressing play. "You can ignore me all you want, but karma doesn't skip placeholders, Lucy. You'll get what's coming." Nate laughed bitterly. "He's quoting Instagram motivational posts now." "Yeah," I said, from his gym coach's account. It escalated from there. First came the email's subject lines like, "You'll regret this," and "You think you won," that went straight to spam. Then came the flyers. Actual printed flyers posted on my apartment building's bulletin board. "Beware of homewreckers. 8 girl. Brown hair, fake nice smile. Stole her ex's best friend." I tore them down, shaking, half angry, half embarrassed. My neighbor, Mrs. Leung, an 80-year-old retired lawyer with a cane and zero tolerance for nonsense, spotted me and said, "Let me handle this." The next morning, she was in the lobby with her thermos of tea when Brian's mother, Patricia, showed up in her beige suit and pearls ready to wage suburban war. "That girl destroyed my son's relationship," Patricia announced to whoever would listen. "That woman," Mrs. Leung corrected, standing her full height, which was impressive for someone under 5 feet. "And your son destroyed that himself," Patricia glared. "Excuse me?" Mrs. Leung leaned in. "He yelled at her in public. He's lucky she didn't press charges for harassment. Now leave before I call my grandson. He's a prosecutor." Patricia left in a huff, clutching her pearls like her morals were choking her. Mrs. Leung winked at me later. "Some men grow up, some just get gym memberships." Nate thought it was over. I knew better. Brian had always been the type who needed an audience. When he couldn't get attention from me, he found it somewhere else. He started posting about me online vague quotes like, "Never trust someone who hides behind quiet eyes," and "Real love doesn't betray, fake love drinks iced coffee and acts innocent." Within days, he'd created an Instagram account called @LucyTheSnake, featuring blurry photos of me walking to work captioned, "She'll steal your best friend. Protect your peace kings." I didn't cry. I didn't comment. I just screenshot everything. Nate, on the other hand, made a counter account called @BrianThePlaceholder, posting screenshots of Brian's own messages. "You're a solid 6. You're temporary. I need someone better." Within 48 hours, his account had triple the followers of Brian's. The comments were merciless. Imagine calling someone a placeholder and getting replaced by her happiness. "Therapy is cheaper than revenge, bro. She leveled up and left you buffering." A week later, I got a text from an unknown number, Brian. "Enjoy your 15 minutes. You'll see who wins in the end." Then silence. Until 2 days later, when Nate sent me a screenshot of a new group chat, "Justice for Brian." He said, "You're not going to believe this." Brian had gathered 5 of his exes, women he'd ghosted, cheated on, lied to, into one chat group. His plan to expose me and Nate for betraying the brotherhood of loyalty. It didn't go well. One of the exes, Riley, sent me the entire chat. "Brian, she ruined my reputation. Xma1. Didn't you dump me by text on my birthday?" X and 2, you told me I was your soulmate. X number 3, wait, you told me that. X number 4, I'm only here because you said there'd be wine. Brian, focus, ladies. We're fighting for justice, Riley. No, you're fighting your reflection, and it's losing. By the time I finished reading, I was laughing so hard tears ran down my face. Nate was beside me, clutching his stomach. He grinned between breaths. This is art. This is Shakespeare-level tragicomedy. Yeah, I said, wiping my eyes. Except in his version, the fool doesn't know he's the fool. But then things took a darker turn. At 2 a.m. one night, I heard shouting outside my window. I peeked through the blinds, and there he was. Brian, standing in the rain, barefoot, holding a Bluetooth speaker blasting "We Are Never Getting Back Together." At first, I thought it was a sick joke. Then I realized he wasn't even at my building. He was yelling at the wrong window across the street. Lucy, I know you're in there with him. The man in that apartment, a middle-aged guy named Carl, opened his window bewildered. Lady, I'm not Lucy. Don't lie to me, Brian screamed. I know she's in there. Carl's husband appeared beside him, arms crossed. Should we call the cops or the exorcist? I couldn't stop laughing as I watched from my window phone recording the entire scene. Security arrived 5 minutes later. The guard sighed. Sir, you're at the wrong building again. You're banned from here, remember? That was for art, Brian shouted. It was vandalism, the guard said flatly. And it wasn't even her car. The next morning, Nate texted, Your ex serenaded the wrong couple again. Twitter has footage. Attached was a clip titled, Local man declares war on the alphabet screams at building C instead of B. It had 40,000 views. I laughed until my ribs hurt. And somewhere between laughter and disbelief, I realized the most healing part of all this wasn't revenge. It was watching him unravel in a world that no longer needed me to hold him together, because I'd already let go. It had been a month since the night Brian tried to serenade the wrong building. A whole absurd month where peace slowly rebuilt itself brick by brick in my life. I changed my number, blocked his family, learned how to sleep through the night again. The world was finally quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Then came that morning, the morning of Nate's PhD defense, the day he'd been working toward for 5 years. I remember waking up early making pancakes because I couldn't stop fidgeting, then walking to campus with a nervous energy that didn't belong to me but to him. He was calm, collected in his gray suit, clutching his USB drive like a sword. You look like you're about to change the world, I told him. He smiled. Only if the PowerPoint doesn't crash. The auditorium was full, professors, grad students, people from the department. I sat in the back, proud but small, watching him speak about renewable energy and sustainable grid systems like he was telling the universe its own secret. Every slide, every pause, every confident glance, it was art. And then the door creaked open. Even before I turned, I felt her. The perfume, the heavy footsteps, the tension rippling down the row like static. Brian's mother, Patricia, slipped into the back row first. And right behind her, wearing a flowing white dress like she was attending her own wedding, Brian. My stomach dropped. He stood at the door for a moment, surveying the room, then smirked when he saw me. I mouthed, Don't you dare. He mouthed back, Watch me. Before I could move, he walked right down the aisle mid-presentation and shouted, I have something to say. The entire panel froze. One professor lowered his glasses. Nate paused, pointer still in hand, expression unreadable. Sir, said Dr. Harrison, the chair of the committee, this is a closed academic defense. Who are you? I'm the victim here, Brian declared, chest puffed like a martyr. That woman, he pointed at me, stole my best friend, my life, my future. Dr. Harrison blinked. Your future. And she corrupted him, Brian continued. He was my brother, and now he's up there pretending to save the planet while destroying people's hearts. The room was silent except for one faint sound, the clatter of Nate setting down his pointer. He exhaled slowly. Brian, he said, voice steady. This isn't your stage. Please leave. Brian laughed loud and theatrical. Oh, it's my stage now because you wouldn't even be here if it weren't for me. A murmur rippled through the audience. Dr. Harrison rubbed his temples. Security. 2 campus guards moved down the aisle. But Brian wasn't finished. He turned toward me, voice trembling between rage and desperation. Lucy, you think you've won, don't you? You took everything. You turned my friends against me, made me a joke online. I stood up. No, Brian, you did that to yourself. You ruined my life. I tilted my head calm but sharp. No, I just stopped living it for you. He lunged forward, not violently, just erratically, like a man chasing a shadow that no longer wanted him. His mother called out, "Brian, please." But the guards were already there, gently but firmly leading him out. As they escorted him past the door, he twisted one last time, shouting, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." Dr. Harrison watched the door close, then sighed deeply. "Good heavens," he muttered, turning back to Nate. "Young man, are you ready to continue?" Nate gave the faintest smile. "Yes, sir. Sorry for the renewable drama." Laughter broke out, cautious at first, then warm. The tension snapped clean in half. And just like that, he picked up his pointer again and finished his presentation like nothing had happened. When it was over, the room erupted in applause. Nate had passed with distinction. His advisor called it one of the best defenses in recent memory. I clapped until my palms stung. Afterward, in the hallway, he found me still a little shell-shocked. "You okay?" he asked. "I should be asking you that," I said, half laughing. "You just had your defense hijacked by my emotionally unstable ex." He shrugged. "At least now the committee knows I can handle interruptions." That night, his research group threw a small celebration at a local bar. There was music, warmth, and laughter. Everything that had been missing from my life for too long. I stepped outside for airphone buzzing in my hand. A new message, unknown number. "Brian's getting help. This is Patricia. I'm sorry for everything. He stopped his meds months ago. He's trying to be better. Thank you for not pressing charges." I stared at the screen for a while. Then I typed, "I hope he gets the help he needs," and hit send. It wasn't forgiveness, it was closure. Later that night, back at Nate's apartment, we sat in silence on the couch, his dissertation folder still open beside him, my hand resting over his. He smiled, tired, but free. "You know," he said quietly, "you were never a placeholder. You just had to outgrow the wrong story." I smiled back, "And write a better one." Before going to bed, I changed all my streaming passwords again, not because I was afraid he'd use them, but because I finally could. Freedom, I learned, isn't loud. It's quiet. It's peace that no one can hold hostage anymore. And as I drifted to sleep with Nate's breathing soft beside me, I whispered to the dark, "Turns out revenge doesn't need fireworks. Sometimes it just looks like happiness that keeps going." 2 months later, the storm was officially over. No more anonymous numbers. No more late-night voicemails. No more flyers on my building door. Just quiet. Honest, healing quiet. Nate and I moved into a new apartment on the east side of the city. A place with sunlight, a balcony full of plants, and no memories that needed erasing. I remember standing by the window, our first morning there, the smell of coffee and cinnamon drifting through the air, and realizing something so simple it almost hurt. This is what normal feels like. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Penny for your thoughts." I smiled, just trying to remember the last time peace felt this loud. He kissed the side of my neck. "Get used to it." A week later, the unexpected happened again, but this time it wasn't chaos, it was closure. I got a call from an Oregon number. When I answered, a familiar but softer voice came through. "Hi, Lucy. It's Patricia." I took a breath. "Hi, Mrs. Sterling. I just wanted to tell you," she said slowly. "Brian's in a wellness program in Portland. Therapy, medication, supervision. He finally admitted what he did. To you, to others. He's sorry. I didn't speak. I'm not asking you to forgive him," she continued. "Just to know he's trying." Something inside me untangled a little. Not forgiveness, just release. "Thank you for letting me know," I said. "I hope he finds peace. He's teaching yoga now," she added, almost laughing. "Calls himself a mindful masculinity coach." That one made me chuckle. Well, good for him. When I hung up, Nate looked over from the couch. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "It's weird. I used to picture revenge as this grand thing, loud, dramatic. Now I think it's just moving on so quietly they have to hear the silence from miles away." He smiled. "That's the Lucy I know." 2 weeks later, my life shifted again, but this time upward. That small app I'd been building during my insomnia nights, the one Brian once called a cute hobby, I sold it. A clean, legitimate acquisition deal that paid enough for a down payment on a house and then some. When I signed the papers, I felt the ghosts of old words fade for good. "You're just comfortable. You'll never be endgame. You're a placeholder." No, I was a builder, and I just built my own freedom. On moving day, our friends helped us haul boxes, laughing and teasing Nate about how many books he owned. At some point, the doorbell rang, and when I opened it, I froze. It was a delivery man with flowers, wild sunflowers, my favorite. The card attached read, "Congratulations, Lucy. You were never a placeholder, a better version of me. No name, no address, just that." I knew who it was, of course. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel anger or fear. Just gratitude that it was finally over. I tossed the card, kept the flowers. That evening, Nate made dinner his famous lemon pasta, and we ate on the balcony under string lights, the city humming gently below us. Halfway through dessert, he looked at me with that same quiet confidence he'd had since the day I met him. "Lucy," he said, "can I tell you something?" "Always. You're the calm. After every storm I never knew I needed." I smiled. "And you're proof that patience can look a lot like love." He raised his glass. "To new chapters." "To better stories," I replied. Later that night, I scrolled through my old blocked messages before deleting them all for good. At the very top was the last text Brian ever sent. "I'm moving to Portland. You'll never see me again. This is the last message." Then a minute later, "Okay, this is the last one." And then 41 more variations of that. I laughed until tears rolled down my face. Then I hit delete all. Because holding on doesn't make you strong. Letting go does. Sometimes I still get DMs from strangers who followed the online mess months ago. They ask, "Don't you regret how it all happened?" I always give the same answer. No, because that chaos introduced me to peace and to the man who helped me see it. Now every Sunday morning, Nate and I make pancakes together. It started as a small joke, him teasing me that I measured success by whether or not the batter clumped. But over time, it became something more, a ritual of ordinary joy, a reminder that love doesn't have to shout to be real. He always flips the first pancake too early and calls it the Brian. We laugh every time. And sometimes when the sunlight hits the kitchen tiles just right, I whisper to myself, "Turns out revenge doesn't need fireworks. It's just the quiet, steady rhythm of a life that finally belongs to you."